There is a very specific, terrifying silence that hits right before you freeze to death. You're utterly stranded in the middle of nowhere, or your ship just sank, or you're trapped in a collapsing building and you've burned through your absolute last ounce of adrenaline. Your core temperature is dropping, your toes filed for divorce 3 hours ago, and your brain is currently trying to convince you that taking a nap in a snowbank is actually a fantastic idea. You are entirely alone, and you are about to die. You close your eyes. You finally give up. But right as you're about to fade to black, a voice says, "Get up." You open your eyes and suddenly someone is standing next to you, a stranger. They don't panic. They just tell you to keep moving. They walk beside you. They tell you exactly where to step. They keep you awake and they drag you all the way back to civilization. But when you finally reach safety, you turn around to thank them, maybe buy them a drink, and there is no one there. There's only one set of footprints in the snow. You didn't imagine it, but you aren't crazy either. You just experienced the most terrifying, brilliant biological magic trick in human history. This isn't a campfire ghost story. This is a documented medical phenomenon called the third man factor, and it only happens to people who are pushed past the absolute limit of human suffering. Take Ernest Shackleton. In 1916, his ship got crushed by Antarctic ice because back then, dying of scurvy in the freezing cold was considered a fun weekend hobby. Shackleton and 2 of his men had to march 36 hours straight over glaciers to find help. When they finally survived, Shackleton wrote in his diary that during the darkest part of the march, he felt with absolute certainty that there were 4 people walking, not 3. And here is the creepy part. He didn't tell his men, but weeks later, both of them confessed to him that they felt the exact same invisible person walking beside them. Or look at Frank Smythe climbing Mount Everest in 1933. He was completely alone at 28,000 feet, starving and hallucinating. He was so convinced that a climbing partner was right behind him that he reached into his pocket, broke off a piece of his mint cake, and held it out to share. He stood there holding a snack out for literal empty space, which is embarrassing, sure, but also deeply unsettling. This isn't just an old-timey explorer thing either. On September 11th, a man named Ron DeFrancesco was trapped on the 84th floor of the South Tower. He was lying on the ground, choking on smoke, ready to let go. Suddenly, a distinct male voice told him to get up. The voice physically guided him through the fire, pushed him down the stairs, and got him out just before the building collapsed. These are some of the most elite, resilient survivors on planet Earth. They're not lying. They all interacted with an entity that wasn't there. So, what exactly is walking with them? Science actually has an answer. And honestly, it's a lot creepier than ghosts, because it turns out you aren't the only one piloting your brain. If it was just Shackleton on the ice or Smythe on a mountain, you could write it off. Altitude sickness, hypoxia, the brain freezing. Case closed, right? Except it happens at sea level. It happens in the sky. It happens underwater. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh became the first person to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean. He was crammed into a tiny cockpit for 33.5 hours. By the 22nd hour, extreme sleep deprivation set in. The cabin was freezing, he was flying completely blind through fog, and his body was shutting down. Then the fuselage behind him filled with people. Lindbergh later wrote that distinct vapor-like phantoms appeared in the cockpit. They didn't just sit there being spooky. They started speaking to him in clear human voices. They gave him complex navigational advice. They kept him awake. They literally co-piloted the plane. Lindbergh was so comforted by them, he stopped feeling alone. But maybe you think that's just sleep deprivation. Fine. Let's go underwater. In 1997, a world-class cave diver named Stephanie Schwab was exploring a blacked-out underwater cave system in the Bahamas. Suddenly, her safety line snapped. If you don't know anything about cave diving, a snapped safety line in a pitch-black underwater labyrinth is a death sentence. You have minutes of air left, and every direction looks exactly the same. Panic usually sets in, your heart rate spikes, you suck down your remaining oxygen, and you drown. Stephanie froze, waiting for the panic, but instead of terror, a calm, authoritative voice spoke directly into her head. It said, "Stop, turn around, look at the sediment." It wasn't a hallucination of a ghost, it was an entity giving her hyper-specific technical survival instructions. She obeyed the voice, found the undisturbed sand, tracked her way back to the main line, and survived. So we have mountain climbers, astronauts, divers, and 9/11 survivors all experiencing the exact same glitch. Different environments, different eras, different people. They all describe the presence not as a hallucination, but as a completely separate intelligence, an intelligence that is smarter, calmer, and more capable than they are. Which brings us to the terrifying question: if no one was physically there, who the hell was talking to them? To understand what is saving these people, we have to look at one of the most controversial, mind-bending psychological theories ever proposed, Julian Jaynes's theory of the bicameral mind. Jaynes argued that ancient humans, the ones who built the first cities, didn't have consciousness the way we do. They didn't sit around having internal monologues or debating what to eat for lunch. Instead, their brains were strictly divided into two distinct chambers. One half of the brain experienced the world, and the other half issued commands. But because they didn't have the concept of self-awareness yet, when the command half spoke, the experiencing half literally heard it as an external voice. They didn't think, "I should plant crops today." They literally heard a booming voice from the sky saying, "Plant crops." They thought the gods were talking to them. In reality, their own brain was just giving them instructions over a biological megaphone. Evolution eventually glued these two halves together into the modern, self-aware consciousness you are using to watch this video right now. We learned to recognize the voice in our head as our own. But neuroscientists and survival psychologists believe that original hardware didn't disappear, it just got buried. When you are trapped in a collapsing building or freezing on a glacier, the modern logical part of your brain, the frontal lobe, panics. It calculates the odds, realizes you are going to die, and essentially tries to quit the game. But your deep, ancient brain, the lizard brain, it refuses to die. So it pulls off the ultimate biological hack. It forcefully unplugs your conscious, panicking self. It takes the wheel, boots up that ancient bicameral software, and projects its own survival instincts outward as a separate external person. Why? Because humans are pack animals. You will give up on yourself in a heartbeat, but you will follow a leader. You will obey a guide. Your brain literally creates a burner account to trick you into surviving. The third man factor isn't a ghost story. It's a mirror, and what it reflects is deeply uncomfortable. We walk through our entire lives with this arrogant assumption that we are in charge. You think you are a single, unified person. You think you know every dark corner of your own mind. But the truth is, your consciousness is just the user interface. It's the shiny app running on the surface. But underneath, in the dark, there is an entirely separate operating system. It has your memories, it has your skills, it knows how to fly planes, navigate caves, and survive the apocalypse, and it is completely independent from you. You will probably go your entire life without ever meeting them. They will stay perfectly quiet while you stress about your emails or your rent or your awkward social interactions. They don't care about any of that. They are only waiting for one thing: the day you finally hit the wall, the day the world breaks you and you drop to your knees in the dark, completely alone, and decide to give up. That is the day you'll realize you were never actually alone to begin with.